There's a moment, quiet, quick, when someone throws shade at you, at your character, your worth, your name, and your first instinct is to explain. To fix it, to say, "That's not what I meant." You feel the heat in your chest, the pulse in your neck. You want to speak, you want to clear it up, but here's the truth no one ever told you. Every word you use to defend yourself is a thread you hand them to hang your reputation with. The louder you explain, the more guilty you sound, not because you are, but because silence doesn't beg for belief. It dares them to question themselves. Most people lose power not because they're wrong, but because they panic when accused. They shrink, they explain, they chase clarity like a drowning man chasing air, and in that chase, they forget the first law of dominance. The man who controls the frame never speaks first. You've been trained to think silence is weakness, that explaining is noble, that being understood is the goal. But what if you've been trained wrong? What if clarity is for therapy and control is for power? What if your silence is your sharpest weapon? And what if, just maybe, the less you say, the more untouchable you become? Let's begin. What if I told you that every time you defend yourself, you lose something more valuable than truth? You lose the frame. And when they own the frame, they own you. That moment you jump in to explain, to justify, to clear your name feels smart, right, feels fair, feels like the adult thing to do. But you've already surrendered, quietly, invisibly. Because when you explain, you don't just talk, you kneel, you signal to the room that their version of the story is valid enough to deserve your energy, that their accusation has weight, that their words have power over your reality. You've told them, without meaning to, yes, your judgment matters more than my presence. Most people don't see this. They think communication is the fix. If I just say it the right way, they'll get me. If I say it again, slower this time, they'll believe me. But listen carefully, you're not trying to be understood. You're trying to regain control. That's the trap, because no amount of talking can fix what was never about the facts. Accusations aren't about truth, they're about leverage. They're about destabilizing you, just enough for someone else to rise, and the second you try to explain, you confirm it worked. There's a reason high-level operators, CEOs, negotiators, political strategists don't rush to defend themselves. They know what you'll soon know. Every explanation sounds like an apology when spoken under pressure, even when you're right. Especially when you're right, because the strong don't defend. They let others exhaust themselves trying to prove a point, while they stand still. Think of Olivia, mid-level manager, sharp, respected, articulate. At the Monday meeting, someone said, "I'm not sure Olivia's strategy is inclusive. Feels like she's pushing her own agenda." All heads turned. She didn't flinch. She didn't correct. She didn't ask, "Well, what do you mean by that?" She simply turned her head, met their eyes, and waited 10 seconds, maybe less, and in those 10 seconds, something wild happened. The accuser began to ramble. I mean, not in a bad way, just maybe, more input from the team, you know. He fumbled, he shrank, he lost the room, not because Olivia defended herself, but because she didn't. That's the power you've been handing away your whole life. Every time you tried to clear the air, you're not here to explain. You're here to dominate, and domination doesn't need clarification. It needs stillness, restraint, precision. That's why from this moment on, you stop chasing understanding. You let them misunderstand you. Because when you no longer fear being misunderstood, you start being feared, and that changes everything. But what if someone keeps pushing? What if silence alone isn't enough? Well, that's when things get interesting. Silence isn't surrender, it's a signal. It tells the room something your words never could, that you are the one who chooses when, how, and if you engage. And that choice, that restraint, is terrifying to people who rely on noise to assert power. You've been taught the opposite, that speaking up is strength, that silence is submission. But let's call that what it really is: emotional training for control by others. They taught you to react, to over-explain, to panic at the sound of discomfort, But the people who move the world, the ones no one dares to challenge, they mastered silence. Because silence isn't about doing nothing, it's about doing one thing perfectly, holding the frame. Think of Marcus. Corporate strategist in London, always calm, always watching. A junior executive once snapped at him in a boardroom, "You never listen. You just manipulate conversations." Everyone looked to Marcus. He didn't blink. No eye roll, no smirk. No defense. He simply leaned back, hands folded, and looked at the man, quiet, unmoving. 10 seconds. 15. By the 20th second, the accuser broke. "I mean, not manipulate, just, you have a strong presence, that's all, eh?" The room shifted. Now no one saw Marcus as guilty, they saw him as untouchable, because silence, real silence, isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of power. The man who doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, doesn't defend, he owns the room. Without a word, because now the accuser feels exposed, like shouting into a mirror, like throwing punches into fog. And the fog doesn't fight back, it just makes you look foolish for swinging. That's why silence works. It's not that it hides your weakness, it makes them question if weakness even exists in you. Because people don't fear what they understand, they fear what they can't read. Your silence isn't confusion, it's control. It says, "I'm not playing your game, I don't dance to your emotion, I don't respond on your cue." It removes you from the field, and once you're off the field, the attacker looks like a madman, shouting into space. The longer you hold that silence, the more the world fills it in. And here's the twist, they never fill it in with weakness, they fill it in with myth. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they assume you're thinking something powerful. That's how legends are made, not through speeches, through silence. But what if the silence doesn't just unsettle them? What if it reflects something back, something they didn't want to see? That's when the game shifts again. When they push, don't push back, don't raise your voice, don't match their energy, don't meet their fire with fire. Instead, hold the mirror, let their words bounce off you and return to them, clearer, sharper, more uncomfortable than before. See, most people don't want truth, they want confirmation. When they accuse you, they want you to engage. They want to see you flinch, protest, scramble. But when you stay calm, when you refuse to mirror their chaos, you force them to see themselves, not you. That's the move. Turn the accusation into a reflection. Let it hover, let it hang. Let them hear the sound of their own voice, with no reaction to mask it. It starts with a simple shift in posture, not physical, emotional. You don't shrink, you don't lean forward, you don't explain, you hold still, let the silence swell. Then, with zero resistance, you offer back the frame, not with sarcasm, not with anger, but with unsettling composure. That's a strong take, an interesting way to see it. Is that how you feel? Sentences that carry no heat, no defense. No hook, but they land like fog in a room full of fire, and suddenly the heat can't breathe. Think of Daniel, young executive, sharp suit, sharper mind. At a client dinner, someone leaned over and said loud enough for the table, "You always sound like you think you're smarter than everyone." Oh, the trap was set. A social challenge, a public test. Daniel didn't answer right away. He sipped his drink. Looked around the room, not at the accuser, then smiled, just barely. If that's how it felt, I'll reflect on that. Oh, no sarcasm, no apology, just a calm deflection. What happened next? The air tightened, the table shifted. The accuser blinked twice and tried to soften his tone. I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking, but it was too late. Everyone saw the imbalance, because Daniel never fought back. He simply allowed the tension to reveal the truth, and in doing so, he shifted the power. Most people think control is about force, but in the world of influence, control is about direction. You don't push back, you guide, you reflect. You let them talk and watch them trip over their own tone, because the more emotion they show, the more they unravel. And the less you say, the more they hear themselves. That's the magic of the mirror. You don't argue in it. You just hold it steady until the image becomes too much to bear. So the next time someone throws a verbal punch, ask yourself, do I need to fight, or is this the perfect moment to let them see themselves? Because when they do, they rarely like what they find. Let them talk, let them rant. Let them over-explain, let them repeat themselves, because every word they speak after the first one is a thread unraveling their own power. See, most people think control comes from talking more, from owning the space, from dominating the conversation, but control isn't about sound, it's about stillness. When someone accuses you, challenges you, or tries to bait you, don't rush to fill the space. Don't break the silence first, let them speak, because the more they speak, the more they reveal, not about you, about them, their insecurities, their projections, their emotional state. You just became their mirror, and they can't stop performing in front of it. That's the secret most never realize. The person who fills the silence always loses the frame. Think about Michelle, a senior advisor at a firm in Chicago, quiet, measured, always composed. At a leadership review, someone accused her of being cold and unapproachable. A younger colleague added, she never shows empathy. It's like she's not even human sometimes. It was public, it was sharp, and it was meant to rattle her. Michelle stayed perfectly still. 1 second, 5, 10, and then nothing, no reaction, no rebuttal, no visible change, just quiet, just presence. What happened? The room shifted. The colleague, now facing silence, began to backtrack. I mean, not in a bad way, just maybe a little more warmth would help. He stumbled, he spiraled, and Michelle, still silent, still calm. By the end of the meeting, the accuser looked insecure, emotional, exposed, because the moment you refuse to play their emotional game, they're the only one left looking unsteady. And here's the deeper layer. The more someone tries to convince a room of something about you, the less the room believes them. Why? Because confident people don't try so hard to make a point. They don't need to repeat themselves. They don't need validation from the crowd. But the accuser who keeps talking, they look desperate. They look unsure. They look like they're trying to convince themselves, not just others, and every extra word is proof of that desperation. That's the paradox. You stay silent, and they expose themselves. You remain still, and their performance escalates. You say nothing, and suddenly they're the one on trial, because here's what the room is watching, not the argument, not the words, but who looks calm and who looks shaken. That's what people trust, not logic, not evidence, but energy. So let them speak, let them unravel, let them feel the pressure of filling silence that isn't theirs to fill. Because when the frame is yours, they can talk all they want. They're just digging deeper for you. Don't aim to beat them, make them beat themselves. That's the true end game. Because no attack is more destructive than the one they deliver to their own credibility. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You don't need to push. You just need to hold your position and let them spin. Because the more someone obsesses over you, the more unstable they appear. It starts slow, a comment, a jab, a sideways insult. They want a spark, they want a rise, but you give them nothing, and that nothing drives them mad. They try again. Maybe louder, maybe sharper, maybe public. Still, you remain still. Now they escalate. What started as an accusation becomes a campaign. They talk about you in rooms you're not in. They post, they gossip. They throw everything they have, hoping to make you move. But here's the twist. Every attempt makes them look more obsessed. And obsession in silence looks like insecurity. It's not that you won, it's that they lost. Chasing a reaction that never came. Look at Blake, senior product director in San Diego. Quiet, respected, always in control. One of his colleagues, Eric, felt threatened. Started small, passive-aggressive remarks in meetings. Comments like, Blake always has a plan, but it's never a team plan, is it? Blake never bit. Didn't argue, didn't defend, he just nodded, or didn't respond at all. Eric ramped up, started planting doubts in the team. Sent long emails to leadership, subtly questioning Blake's decisions. Still nothing. Blake didn't play, and over the next month, something shifted. Eric started over-explaining himself, talking about Blake when Blake wasn't even in the room. Calling meetings that made no sense. He started to unravel, and leadership noticed, because Blake never had to say a word. Eric destroyed his own credibility, not because Blake fought him, but because Blake let the pressure bounce back. That's the power of emotional judo. Use their own force. Let them throw every punch. You don't block. You don't swing back. You step aside, and they fall on their own momentum. People expect conflict. They expect a war of words. They expect drama. So when you give them calm, when you give them nothing, when you give them silence, they don't know what to do with that energy, and so it turns inward. They start arguing with themselves, with their assumptions, with the crowd. With the silence, they spiral, and you, the one they attacked, stay exactly where you were. Unmoved, unbothered, untouchable. This is the reversal. You don't destroy them, you give them the stage, and let them self-destruct. Because sometimes the most brutal revenge is no revenge at all, just stillness and space and the sound of them falling apart, echoing in their own noise. Sometimes the sharpest blade is a smile, not a fake one, not a smug one. A calm, unreadable, detached smile, because when someone calls you arrogant, manipulative, cold, they want tension, they want resistance, they want you to squirm, to protest, to prove. But when you meet that storm with stillness, when you respond not with defense but with a simple shift in tone, you invert the energy. That's the real game. Don't deflect with aggression. Don't deny with panic. Reframe with confidence. Someone says, "You're selfish." You answer, "Strange how boundaries feel selfish to those who don't benefit." They say, "You're controlling." You say, "Only to people who fear structure." They say, "You think you're better than others." You respond, "No, I just think differently." These are not defenses, these are reframes. You're not arguing with their version of you. You're showing them their version is theirs, and suddenly, the spotlight isn't on you, it's on them. They have to explain why your confidence threatens them, why your focus rattles them, why your presence makes them feel smaller. You didn't attack, you didn't insult. You just spoke the truth with too much clarity to deny and too little emotion to fight. It's a quiet redirection, and it works because it shifts the burden. You're no longer the one on trial. They are. Think of Alina, consultant, DC, scene. Direct, precise. A rival in her firm accused her in front of a client. Alina always finds a way to take over. It's like she doesn't trust the rest of us. She turned calm, neutral. If I didn't trust the team, I wouldn't be here. Then she paused, one beat, two, and if I lead, it's because someone had to, and not cruel. Not loud, but it landed like a hammer. Why? Because she didn't fight to defend herself. She reframed their jab as an insecurity and moved forward. No energy wasted, no credibility lost. This is emotional strategy. You don't reject their frame, you make their frame collapse under the weight of its own projection. The words you use don't need to convince, they only need to clarify one thing. You don't live in their reality, you define your own. And when you speak from that place, calmly, briefly, directly, they don't know how to hold their anger, because it has nothing left to feed on. That's the trick. Don't get drawn into their chaos, turn their chaos into your silence, and if needed, let your words be short knives, sharp enough to cut, quiet enough to echo. In a world where everyone's rushing to defend, to explain, to be seen as good, the one who refuses to play that game becomes something else entirely, untouchable, because the moment you stop chasing approval, your presence changes. Your silence stops being absence, it becomes weight. It becomes message, it becomes myth, and people feel that. They feel it in rooms where your name is mentioned. They feel it when your critics keep talking, and you never respond. They feel it when your silence lasts longer than their attention span. Most people think reputation is built by explaining who you are, but the strongest reputations are built by showing who doesn't get to define you. That's what happens when you no longer defend. Your name stops meaning safe. It starts meaning certain. Not always liked, not always trusted, but never doubted, because the man who doesn't explain becomes a question people are too afraid to answer. Take this further. Let's say someone attacks you in front of a crowd. They say you're fake, you've changed, you think you're above us. The average person gets defensive. They try to fix it, to make peace, but not you. You stay still, you let their words land and fall. Then maybe, with perfect stillness, you say, "Is that how you see it?" 4 words, no emotion, no apology, but those 4 words. They shift the entire room, because now everyone isn't looking at you, they're watching the accuser, wondering why they needed to say it, what emotion made them lash out, what insecurity they just exposed, and you just stayed human, but unmoved. That's when power is no longer what you say. It becomes what you withhold. And when you withhold your reaction long enough, people stop looking at the accusation, they start looking at the accuser. That's social gravity, because the calmest person always holds the center. It doesn't matter what's said about you. It matters who moves first, and the man who moves last moves with force. So don't defend, define, not with arguments, with energy, with posture, with the stillness that makes people say, he doesn't fight because he doesn't need to. And the more they wonder why you're so composed, the more powerful you become. There comes a point when they stop attacking. Not because you silence them, but because they've realized it doesn't work. They've watched their words hit the wall of your stillness again and again, and each time it chipped away at them, not you. Because people don't keep fighting what they can't shake. They look for softer targets, ones who flinch, ones who bleed, ones who need to explain. You've become something else now, not a warrior, not a debater, a presence. The kind people mention in quieter tones, the kind that enters a room and changes the temperature without saying a word. It's not about arrogance, it's about command, and command doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being unreadable. Because once they can't read you, they can't control you, and when they can't control you, they retreat. You've trained your body not to twitch, your voice not to rise, your face not to break. You've trained your mind to treat noise like wind, moving around you, not through you. You've trained your emotions to pause instead of plead, and that pause is everything. It says, I don't answer to accusations. I don't chase correction. I don't dance for understanding. It says, I live by my own definition. That's the final shift. You no longer exist inside their courtroom. You don't wait for verdicts. You've walked out of the trial. And now, they're left debating a ghost, someone who no longer plays the game. Even the loudest ones get tired. They stop throwing jabs when the silence swallows them whole, and eventually they look around, they see that no one is clapping. No one is nodding, no one is following, because while they were shouting, you were building a stronger presence, a quieter power, a foundation no insult can reach. That's why you don't respond. Because every time you don't defend, the room starts to wonder if he's not reacting. What does he know? And that question, that's the most dangerous answer you never have to give. You don't win power by chasing truth. You win it by controlling perception, and the greatest perception, that you don't need anyone to believe you. That you don't even care, because the man who no longer needs validation becomes immune to attack. Think about it. Most people spend their lives reacting, explaining, clarifying. They live on defense, hoping the world gives them a fair shot. But fair doesn't exist in power. What exists is energy, and energy bends to certainty, not to explanations, not to pleas, to presence. So what do you do now? You stop defending completely. You build something stronger. Something quieter, an aura, an energy that enters the room first, that speaks before you do, that silences the noise before it begins. And how do you build it? Not through words, through discipline. Discipline to say less, discipline to move slower, discipline to choose silence over panic, and clarity over chaos. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they fear what you might be. They fill in the blanks. And when the blanks are filled with strength, they respect you. When the blanks are filled with mystery, they hesitate. And hesitation is leverage. You become the one who doesn't flinch, the one who lets others unravel, the one who answers to no one but himself. And here's the paradox: the more you remain calm, the more others speak on your behalf. They'll say, he doesn't deserve that, she didn't even react, and they're still coming for her. Oh, they're just threatened by him. You don't need to say a word, they build your defense for you, and that's not reputation, that's legacy. Because the strongest legacy isn't loud, it's built in restraint, in stillness, in the quiet refusal to play the game. So from now on, let them accuse, let them misunderstand, let them reach. You don't chase, you define with your posture, with your timing, with your silence, and eventually even your absence becomes presence, a presence they can't shake, can't touch, can't silence, because true power doesn't announce itself, it doesn't plead, it doesn't defend, it just stands. And when it does, the room shifts, the crowd quiets, and the world remembers your name.